It's a common sense recap of the big stories. It's Katz and Cosby on 77 WABC.
John, we have an awesome guest coming up right now.
Well, one of my favorite governors. And, Governor, I think you would have been the vice president, but I think you were too tall.
Well, good afternoon, John and Rita. Great to be with you. And as always, I just love our conversations. I have to say that, Virginia's competitive right now. And we had a poll pop out last week that had the Harris-Trump race in the margin of error. And I think it has everything to do with the fact that we are seeing Virginians and Americans recognize that Kamala Harris is the liberal left progressive candidate that everyone thinks she is. She just hasn't been forced to speak yet. And after 37 days with no interviews, she's going to have one. And of course, when she gets on the debate stage, she's going to have to express her views. And the reality is that she is the candidate who has said that she would never vote for a piece of legislation to fund the border wall. She is the one who was the border czar and refused to do anything about protecting America's sovereignty. And she is the candidate that was the last person to speak with Joe Biden before the disastrous withdrawal out of Afghanistan. I mean, this is a candidate who is flawed, and I think everyone knows it. And this is why I believe between now and November 5th, America is going to see the real Kamala Harris again.
Governor, I mean, there's one thing. Me and you, we grew up in an age of our country that everything was honesty and integrity. How can there be so many lies?
Yeah, what's stunning is I actually don't believe that Kamala Harris has flip-flopped. What do I mean by that? She hasn't come out and said that she doesn't believe in EV mandates. We actually have just seen or heard from staff on an anonymous basis suggesting she might be changing her mind on these things. The reality is Kamala Harris is the candidate who wants to ban fracking. She wanted Medicare for all. She said she'd never spend a single dollar on a border wall. She doesn't want to put any illegal immigrants in jail. She wants to give them free education. She wants to abolish the filibuster. And as I said, she was the last one in the room with Joe Biden before the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan. She was the one that put her signature to pass legislation that unleashed unbridled spending. And finally, she is the border czar. And anybody who suggests she isn't, of course, doesn't understand that when Joe Biden says she's in charge of the border, that meant she was supposed to go there and fix it. And she didn't even go.
You know, Governor Glenn Youngkin, you also just recently kind of cleaned up the voter rolls. I say bravo to you. And you found more than 6,300 non-citizens that were on the voting rolls. We had Ken Paxton, the Attorney General, on yesterday talking about what they did in Texas. Bravo to you. But how concerning is this to you, that this is probably happening? I think about other governors across the country that are not following your charge, and they should be.
Well, I first believe strongly that the job of a governor is to make sure that our elections are fair, that they're trusted, and they're transparent. And that's something that I take incredibly seriously. The executive order that I issued did exactly that. First thing we've done is demand on a daily basis that our voter rolls are scrubbed using really straightforward data analytics. If someone's not a citizen because they are not a citizen on the Social Security list or in our DMV data, then they come off the voter rolls. And how about this? We do this very simple process, and yes, we find over 6,300 non-citizens on the voter rolls. We did something very similar, and we continue to do with regards to Virginians who sadly have died, and we found nearly 80,000 of them that were on the voter rolls. This is straightforward data analytics. It's something that I think every state should be doing in order to make sure that America's elections are decided by American citizens.
Governor, this is Rudy Washington. We met at the Museum of the Bible at that event 2 years ago.
Absolutely. Great to speak with you again.
Yes. And don't forget, they want to pack the courts also. And we know what that means. They want to pack the Supreme Court. But, Governor, one of the problems we have here in New York State is that we have local municipalities signing up illegals to vote, and they get to the voting rolls, right? Now we come to a federal election. How do you distinguish between the two, where you got local municipalities signing people up, and now we come to our federal election, and they are registered voters?
Well, at the end of the day, they need to be very clear that non-citizens are not allowed to vote in federal elections, and if they do, it is a crime. And that's the last piece of my executive order, which is to post very clearly that non-citizens voting in federal elections is a crime. And I think it's just critically important to be very clear. The bottom line is that we can in fact scrub the voting rolls and make sure that non-citizens aren't voting in federal elections or in Virginia and state elections or local elections. I also am a big advocate of Speaker Johnson's bill that requires anyone who is registering to vote to prove that they are a citizen. And the reality is the decade-old motor voter rule created the ability for folks either by accident or through nefarious reasons to register to vote when they're non-citizens, and that's why we've been taking real action in Virginia.
You know, Governor Glenn Youngkin, also you're obviously, I think, fighting this and bringing attention to fentanyl big time. We're seeing this in so many communities. Rudy Washington and I were just talking also before the show of what's happening in Aurora, Colorado, where gangs, the Venezuelan gang has literally taken over almost the city. And it's because the governor is not intervening, letting it happen. We're seeing this migrant crime. And yet we have right now a White House that barely ever says the word fentanyl, barely ever talks about migrant crime. And it is polluting. It's sadly fentanyl and so many other things, every city, and including many there in Virginia.
Yeah, no, it's just a travesty. And it's also just heart-wrenching to meet with families whose children have been poisoned by fentanyl, where they thought they were taking a Percocet or something else, and it was in fact laced with fentanyl. This requires immediate action. The first step, and I have already mentioned it, is that President Trump, when he's president, must close the border, and he knows that. And he's got to secure it, and the free flow of illegal drugs and human trafficking and terrorists across our border is such a massive challenge that every state is a border state. And we today have, on average, 5 Virginians who die every day from fentanyl overdoses. We have gone to work. We've cooperated with federal, state, and local resources, and our drug seizures have gone through the roof. Just in the month of May, we seized enough fentanyl to poison every Virginia multiple times over, with a street value of $1.2 billion just in the month of May. This is real stuff. And that's also why we've gone to work to educate families and students and coaches and pastors and everybody else on the deathly implication of a fentanyl overdose. And then finally, we launched just yesterday a statewide campaign to unleash the families. These heartbroken families who have seen their loved ones poisoned are willing to go to work and advocate and inform and cajole and shame local authorities and many of the colleagues in Virginia who have not come along with us in order to combat fentanyl and what it means. I've also passed an executive order that demands that schools notify all families within 24 hours if there is a drug overdose in their school. We've got to shine a light on the deathly nature of fentanyl in this country. We know where it comes from. It comes from China. It goes through Mexico, and it comes over the border. And therefore, we must hold China accountable. But on top of that, get this border secured. Absolutely.
Governor Glenn Youngkin, Tony Carbonetti has a question.
Governor, I couldn't agree more. And the media was quick to start, the tally board during COVID when the COVID death started. This is a daily problem in every state in the country. It's going up. It's getting worse. Why do we not talk about this? Why don't they put this in the face of the American people of how many people are dying every day because of fentanyl?
Yeah, I 100% agree. And it is, once again, I believe mainstream media trying very much to protect failure of this Biden.
They couldn't wait for that COVID death tally every night. They were quick to push that.
And they do not want to talk about fentanyl. And that's why we must talk about it. And I have to say, every time I go to high school, and my wife Suzanne has been on the absolute front foot on this, she in fact pioneered a national partnership with the First Lady in New Jersey, and the two of them brought together 35 of the first spouses this past week during Fentanyl Awareness and Overdose Prevention Day to bring awareness to this issue. And if we are not doing this, nobody will, because the media has not covered it like it should.
Keep doing it.
Yeah, keep doing it. Judge Weinberg.
Governor, good to talk to you again, sir. I think the real problem, and you alluded to it, is the China problem. If you had a strong leadership out of the White House, you would make it perfectly clear the Chinese government, because they couldn't do this drug trade without the Chinese Communist Party and their government allowing it to happen. So you need strong leadership out of the White House. Your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why this election continues to be an election of strength versus weakness. And what we've seen from Kamala Harris is a career that displays weakness economically. And listen, her economic policies are nothing more than gimmicks that will drive inflation. Her foreign policy standards are going to just emulate Joe Biden's weakness, which is unleashed war in Ukraine, war in the Middle East, and of course China's boldness in threatening Taiwan. And then finally, her weakness at the border. And the reality is we would not be in this circumstance today if they had just left in place President Trump's border policies. We've got to get back to being strong economically, strong around the world where we have peace through strength, and we must have a secure border. The net of this is, at the end of the day, it is strength versus weakness, and it's why we have to put strength back in the White House.
And Governor, I understand Virginia is the number one state in the country in business increases.
John, you noticed.
I
tell you what, if you haven't heard, CNBC ranked us the top state for business in America. And I will tell you that common sense conservative policies work. When we came in 2.5 years ago, Virginia was bottom third in job growth. The economy had stagnated. More small businesses were closing than you could possibly believe. And more people were moving away from Virginia than to Virginia from another 49 states. And in the last 2.5 years, we have gone to work with massive tax relief, regulatory reform, and we are the top state in America for business. 260,000 more Virginians working today, budget surpluses, and we continue to drive forward to create opportunity across the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Congratulations, Governor. Thank you for coming on, and we'll talk again real soon.
Thank you, Governor.
Thank you.